Imagine being a black woman in America in 1864. The Civil War isn't even over yet. Slavery still exists in parts of the United States. Women can't vote. And you decide, I'm going to become a doctor, not a nurse, not an assistant, a physician. And then you actually do it. Her name was Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler. And in 1864, she became the first black woman known to earn a medical degree in the United States. But becoming the first only is the beginning of her story. Because after earning that degree, she would eventually travel south and use her medical training to care for formerly enslaved black Americans. And years later, she would put her medical knowledge into a book. So today, we are talking about a woman who broke barriers in medicine before Black Americans had even secured the freedoms we sometimes take for granted today. I'm Tay Nicole, and this is Let's Talk Black History with me, Miss Tay Nicole. Let's talk about Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler. Okay, so Miss Dr. Rebecca Davis was born on February 8th, 1831 in Delaware. But a major influence on the woman she would eventually become came from her childhood in Pennsylvania. Rebecca was raised in a small part of town by her aunt, who was well known for taking care of the people that were sick in her community. And at a young age, Rebecca watched her. Think about how important that was for Rebecca. Before medical school, before the degree, before anybody could call her doctor, Rebecca had already been privy to what it looked like to take care of people who needed help. Years later, she would write that being raised by this aunt helped inspire her desires that revealed suffering, that relieved suffering people, and eventually that desire became her life's work. Okay. By 1850-ish, Rebecca had moved to Charlestown, Massachusetts. There she worked as a nurse. Now remember, nursing at this time didn't look exactly like the profession we know today. Formerly, nursing school weren't yet common in the United States. Rebecca spent roughly 8 years working as a nurse, and apparently she was good at it because doctors she worked with encouraged her to pursue something even bigger: medical school. Now, becoming a doctor in the 1800s was already an unusual path for a woman. Add being black on top of that. Rebecca was attempting to enter a profession dominated overwhelmingly by white men, but she applied to New England Female Medical College in Boston and was accepted. Rebecca began studying medicine in 1860, and look at what was happening around her. Abraham Lincoln was elected president that year. The Civil War began the following year. The country was literally tearing itself apart over slavery. And in the middle of this, in the middle of all of it, Rebecca was studying medicine. Her education wasn't necessarily an easy, uninterrupted journey. The Civil War affected medical training and opportunities across the country. But Rebecca, she continued. And in 1864, she earned the degree of Doctor of Medicine, MD. That made Rebecca Lee, her married name at that time, the first black woman known to earn an MD in the United States. Just think about the year one more time. 1864. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery had not yet been ratified. Black men wouldn't receive constitutional voting protection through the 15th Amendment until about 1870. Women wouldn't receive constitutional voting protections until about 1920. Yet, Rebecca Lee Crumpler was already walking into a medical profession as a black woman, a black physician. That's why context matters when we talk about first. Saying she was the first black woman doctor is impressive. Understanding when she did it makes it extraordinary, makes it history. Rebecca later married Arthur Crumpler, and she became known as Rebecca Lee Crumpler. She initially practiced medicine around Boston, but then the Civil War ended in 1865, and America faced another enormous challenge. Millions of formerly enslaved people were now free, but freedom didn't magically provide housing. It didn't provide food, and it certainly didn't guarantee health care. Formerly enslaved Black Americans faced poverty, disease, displacement, and enormous lack of medical resources. Rebecca saw an opportunity to use her education where it was desperately needed. So she went to Richmond, Virginia. Good old Virginia. I want to spend a little time here because this is the part of her story that deserves more attention. See, Dr. Crumpler wasn't simply interested in having the title. She wanted to use it. In Richmond, she worked with organizations including the Freedmen's Bureau and missionary groups to provide medical care to informally enslaved people. These were people who only had a short time, could literally have been legally owned by another human being. Now they were trying to build lives as free people, and Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was there providing medical care. She particularly worked with women and children, but being a doctor didn't protect her from racism, and having a medical degree didn't protect her from sexism. She encountered prejudice from some fellow physicians and others who questioned her authority and credentials. Think about the position she was in. She had already done the work. She had already completed medical school. She had already earned the degree. And she still had to deal with people questioning whether she belonged. Yet she continued treating patients. She continued being excellent. After her time in Richmond, Dr. Rebecca returned to Boston. She settled in the Beacon Hill area and continued practicing medicine. And one thing that stands out about her practice was her focus on people who might otherwise struggle to receive medical care. She treated women and children and wrote that she cared for patients regardless of their ability to pay. That tells us something important about how she viewed medicine. See, Dr. Crumpler's healthcare wasn't simply a career, it was a service. But she wasn't finished making history. Because eventually Dr. Crumpler decided to take what she had already learned, over the decades, of course, and put it on paper. This is where the book comes in at. So, in 1883, Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler published a book of medical discourses in 2 parts. The book drew from her years of medical experience and focused heavily on the health of women and children. Now think about that. Everything that had happened for that book to exist. A Black girl born in Delaware in 1831 became a nurse, entered medical school, and earned an MD during the Civil War. Treated formerly enslaved people after emancipation. Continued practicing medicine. And then published her medical knowledge for others to use. Her book is so significant because every few Black individuals, medical writers, had been published at that point in time in history. She wasn't just practicing medicine, she was documenting it. And because she documented it, more of her own voice survived. So, the question I keep coming back to, we hear about historic first all the time. The first person to do this. The first woman to accomplish that. The first Black American to break this barrier. But Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler accomplished something extraordinary in 1864, and yet her name isn't nearly as familiar as it should be. Part of that is because records concerning her life are limited. For many years, even authenticated photographs of her wasn't widely known. But here's a also larger lesson here. Black history contains countless people whose contributions didn't disappear because they weren't important. Sometimes the recognition just disappeared. And that's one reason this series exists. Because if we only talk about the same handful of people every year, we miss just how large Black history actually is. Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler died on March 9th, 1895 in Massachusetts. She was 64 years old. And more than a century later, people are still rediscovering what she accomplished. Her name now lives on through medical organizations, scholarships, and efforts honoring Black women in medicine. But I think her greatest legacy is simpler than that. She saw people suffering and decided she wanted the knowledge necessary to help them. She entered spaces where someone like her wasn't really expected. She earned the education. She did the work. And when nearly freed Black Americans needed medical care, she took that knowledge where it could and made a difference. This is where I want to bring everything together, okay? Sometimes when we learn Black history, we hear so much about the barriers that is easy to overlook what Black people accomplish while those barriers exist. Yes, America was segregated. Yes, racism was deeply embedded into society. Yes, women were denied their rights. Yes, slavery was still legal when Rebecca began medical school. All of those things are true. But here's something else that's true. Rebecca Lee Crumpler still became a doctor. That's important because Black history isn't only a history of what was done to Black people. It's also the history of what Black people did anyway. What they built, what they discovered, what they wrote, who they healed, and what they accomplished in a country that frequently told them they couldn't. Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler is part of the history that we all should know today. So the next time somebody asks you who America's first Black woman physician was, you now know her name. Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, a nurse, a physician, an author, a healer, a woman who earned a medical degree in 1864 before the Civil War had even ended. But don't remember her simply because she was the first. Remember what she did once the door opened. She walked right through it and then used what she learned to help somebody else. I'm your host, Miss Nicole, and this has been another episode of Let's Talk Black History. If you learned something new today, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and most importantly, share the story with somebody else. And let me know in the comments, had you ever heard of Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler before today? Until next time, if you know the history, tell the story, and never let them erase it. I also have a petition to put Black history in schools all year round going around. I'll drop the link in the comment section. But in the meantime, in between time, stay peaceful, stay blessed, and let's stay Black, baby. Peace out.